Hi, Zizaran here with another video, and in this video I want to chime in a little bit on my take on Armour in Path of Exile. I've been watching the crypt videos on Armour, etc., and I have some things I agree with, some things I disagree with. I want to talk about like what should be changed with Armour and stuff like that, and some of you might already have seen this Reddit post. I'm going to flashbang you because I haven't put on light mode, but about how Armour is like 2.5 times worse or something like that, or 2.4 times worse in PoE 2 than PoE 1. Now, some of the things I disagreed with was the way Armour was talked about in PoE 1. And in PoE 1, Armour is amazing. I use it on most of my builds, ideally. And even a small amount of armor in PoE 1, like 2,000 armor on the Exarch shield, which I forgot the name of right now. But even that small an armor amount makes a significant difference to your build. So why is Armour so much better in PoE 1 than PoE 2? Is it just the armor formula? And it isn't. The armor formula, I don't know if that's just unintended. A lot of people are saying maybe the armor formula in PoE 2 is just the old one before the buff. Now, the main reason for why Armour is so much worse in PoE 2 is that in PoE 1 we have a large amount of tools. So obviously, like, one of the things I mentioned in PoE 1 is Dawnbreaker, the shield that drops from Exarch, and that has, on top of just having decent armor, it does damage shifting, which Crypt talks about his first video. Like, for example, something like Lightning Coil, which is 50% physical damage taken from hits as lightning, effectively doubles your armor, right? Because its armor is better the smaller the hit. So Armour, what it is meant to do is it's supposed to make loads of small hits do a lot less damage, so that mapping is a lot better. So in a lot of my builds, I'll have a combination of armor and evasion. There are some builds where I will go for full armor when I get to like 40 to 60k. That would be a really good amount for mapping, but even that amount is not enough for bossing. And armor is never really meant to be for bossing. You're never really intended to stand there and tank like the 6-second windup of a boss coin, like, boop, right? That's what dodge roll is for. That is very much the idea of what listening to DDD talking in interviews, they don't want you to do. They don't really want you to face tank. Now, obviously, Energy Shield is probably going to get nerfed for that reason. It just has such a raw amount of HP that you can face tank a lot of these things. But at least the idea that we're getting from PoE 2 is that, well, you're meant to dodge some of the larger hits. And armor is definitely not going to ever be the way you're going to tank those hits, and probably shouldn't be either. Now, PoE 1, we have such a large amount of tools. We have, like I said, damage shifting, so things like Lightning Coil. But on top of that, we also have endurance charges that actually do something to mitigate things. And they don't really do that in the same way in PoE 2. 4% physical damage reduction per endurance charge, that is always 4%. So whether the hit is 100 damage or whether it is 100,000 damage, it is always going to mitigate 4%. And we don't have a lot of these tools. So we're missing, for example, we're missing endurance charges, we're missing fortify, we're missing a large scale damage shifting, we're missing, and obviously in PoE 1, you also have further tools like determination to make armor even better and higher. We don't have physical damage reduction on chest. I believe we only have it on shield and something else. But it's a lot easier to get these sources either way in PoE 1. So when I'm stacking armor in PoE 1, I'm not just doing armor. I'm also doing like the 8% physical damage reduction on chest, 8% on shield. I do damage shift on my helmet. And then it becomes a really strong part of my defense. And I'll even notice when I take like Iron Reflexes, if I take something like Unwavering Stance that removes my evasion completely and I just can't dodge, I do notice that I do take a lot more damage. Even a small amount of evasion, like all of these defenses, even when you have a little bit of it, goes a long way of your defense. And my Witch right now has 0 armor, and I know that if I had 20% armor in addition to my 10,000 energy shield, I'd be so much tankier. Now, and another tool that we have that makes armor stacking really cool in PoE 1 is the Bakwa combined with Fourth Vow. It's a little bit convoluted to explain, but it basically makes that your armor works on chaos damage and elemental mitigation. We don't have that in the same way in PoE 2, so it just all becomes a little bit less worthwhile to stack into. Now, the biggest problem, and both games have this issue, and I totally agree with Crip on this, is that enemies overwhelming your armor or crushing your armor really doesn't have a place in the game. Because the main thing that armor is supposed to solve is it is supposed to be a defense against you mapping. It is supposed to be like, I am mapping, I want to mitigate many small hits from monsters, or basically any hit from a non-slam boss, right? That is what it's for. But overwhelm or like armor break completely invalidates that, where you're even on a very high character. I can't remember exactly, but I remember there was a Reddit post about this a year or two ago, which basically says it's like taking 500% more damage or 200% more damage from one monster suddenly. It's almost like, imagine monsters in maps just had Culling Strike or ignores Energy Shield. It's effectively the same, and it just shouldn't be in the game because it invalidates the entire reason that armor exists. So that is the main thing. I do think the armor formula should be improved too. Like armor should be more efficient, but I think overwhelm should be completely removed from the game. I'm very surprised that they removed fortify. That seems like a very obvious thing to have in the game. I think it's a really good solution to make melee stronger. So the end all be all, again, armor should never be the solution to face tank boss slams. That's not what it's for. That does not feel like the intended idea of armor. If something has like a 3-second wind up and it's a big physical slam, armor should never be your solution to that. Unless you're literally one of the PoE 1 armor stacker where you're like 300 to 500k armor. And I do think those types of builds are fun. But in general, armor should never be the solution to those large hits, and it shouldn't be for most people. Unless you're doing something very outside of the norm. Fortify should be in the game. I personally prefer how charges worked a little bit more in PoE 1, where they did have a passive solution, and we just need more tools like that. Now, a lot of that might be a product of it being early access and that some of these things are coming, but especially in the short term, ideally in the long term, overwhelm and armor break, that being removed already makes armor 20 times more viable. That's it, in my opinion. Now, obviously, like, it's still nowhere on par with Energy Shield and Grim Feast, but I think that's going to be coming anyway. I think most of us that are running Energy Shield are expecting some nerf to Energy Shield. Even if all you do is just remove Grim Feast from the game, I actually think Energy Shield is very in line with armor if you also remove the overwhelm. Because if I have 5,000 life with, you know, 10 to 30k armor, it's probably a very comparable tank to 8 to 10k Energy Shield. Yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say. Remove overwhelm from the game. That's definitely what I agree with from the Crypt video. He had a lot of good points. But PoE 1 armor is really good except for overwhelm. Honestly, it's in PoE 1, armor is in a perfect place except for overwhelm. But at least there you do have the tools to bypass it. So that's my little rant on armor. I'm expecting to see some huge patches by DDD within the next 2 to 3 weeks. I think a lot of builds are going to be nerfed and equalized, especially at the top end where we see people doing 150 million damage from one projectile. I'm hoping we're going to be able to resocket runes, and I'm hoping overwhelm gets removed from the game. But either way, thanks for watching. Sub if you liked the video. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. But more importantly, try to die less than people building armor do.